You mentioned earlier, Pete, that you have done a couple of deals with money partners and you're working on a third one now. So I'm just curious, what triggers the need for you to get a money partner? Did you start out pretty well capitalized? I mean, did you start doing massive campaigns like this? Massive by a lot of people's standards. It sounds like you're not one of these guys that started out with $5,000 total, and that was all the money to your name, right? Like, did you have a good slush fund of cash to work with?
Yeah, we had a good slush fund to start with, and that definitely helped as well. Our other business that I was talking about with the blogger training and everything, that was a very successful business, so we were happy with that. It was just kind of a situation where we were a little bit burnout on that side of things, but we had, some capital saved up, and it allowed us to kind of get into this side of things a lot more easier. We've only done 2 partner deals at this point. Everything else was self-funded. And we recently just bought another larger property with partners. Having that initial slush fund to start with definitely helped, and it allowed us to accelerate the money a lot faster for sure.
I think that's so interesting, Pete, that, your first mailer bombed the way that it did. It sounds like given your past experience, you had the wherewithal to say, all right, well, I probably made a mistake here. Because I think a lot of people, as they jump into a new business, would say either, this land business doesn't work, direct mail doesn't work. It's always everybody else's fault, right? Something else is wrong here. But it looks like and sounds like you had the ownership to say, yeah, well, we sent out 10,000 mailers. It didn't work out. How do we pivot to make this better? Do we offer more money? Do we target a different area? I just want to highlight, though, that that's so valuable and not something a lot of investors do. And also that you've kind of glossed over the whole, it's $5,000. It's whatever, because I know a lot of people don't view it that way. A really good mental shift that I've made in my own land business over the past year or so is that anytime we spend money on marketing, I look at it as an investment rather than an expense. Now, obviously on my P&L, I'm going to write it off as an expense, right? But truly, every single time we've sent out a large amount of marketing or tried a new technique or whatever it is, there's so much learning that comes from that about yourself, about your team, about your process. And so I just want to highlight, I think it was so cool that you took that experience, learned from it, and then went out and bought, 32 properties your first year?
Yeah, 32. Well, I think we bought probably 45 maybe the first year, but we had sold 32. Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, and that's just kind of the way, I knew it was going to be a little bit of a rocky road. And it's anytime you start anything, it's always a rocky road. Unless you're some sort of natural in something, it's always going to be a learning curve, and it's going to be uncomfortable until you get through some of that. And that's why, like when we sold our first property, I already knew it worked. I already knew the business model worked. It's just kind of validation, and it's great to just kind of prove it to yourself and prove it to my wife in my case. So, because, she gives me some rope to do some of these things, but, I still have to, I have to make sure that she's on board with it as well. So,
are you one of these guys with like 20 new ideas a week, and so she helps you kind of filter through those then?
I used to be, the shiny object thing. And I always get ideas, and she does too. But I've realized over time that jumping from thing to thing is not the path to success. You have to really, really focus. And while we could still come up with ideas, it's just a matter of you need to really just focus on certain things in order to achieve what you want to achieve.
So was it like that first deal where you proved it to her? Because it's funny, because I have a very similar story with my wife. Like in general, whenever I have new cool ideas like this, the answer is no. She's kind of like the brakes and I'm the gas. And to her credit, she saved me from so many errors because I just don't think about this stuff that she does. But it was really cool when I did prove it to her. And she was like, wow, that's amazing. Did you have a similar experience, or how long did it take for your wife to understand?
Yeah, she believes in me, definitely. And at least she says she believes in me. No, I think she does. But I think maybe after the first few deals, I think she was starting to get really comfortable with it. It's one of those things. It's a great relationship because, we've got that, I guess, yin and yang, I guess you could say. And she's way more conservative than I am. And yeah, if it was just me left to my own devices, who knows, I'd just kind of blow up maybe. I don't know, but it's good stuff, and doing those, the first deal was great. Second deal was even greater. And then the third deal is yep, I got this now, even though I had a lot to learn at that point.
I think it's worth highlighting just how valuable a partner can be in your life, right? And make sure you pump the brakes when it's appropriate. I know in my own life, there's been countless times that my fiance has stopped me from making some poor choices, we'll call it. But it's funny to see how she continuously encourages me in the right ways, right? That's a good sign of a healthy partner. I'm not sure if I've told this story before, but Seth, I know way back when I was interviewed on here, I told the story about my first deal. And for some context and reminder, the seller on that property was super difficult. I mean, didn't trust title companies, wouldn't accept payment in any form except cash. And so it ended up being this really wonky thing where I drove up to middle of nowhere, Wisconsin, ordered a mobile notary to this man's trailer. I brought $2,000 in cash to buy his property. It was not wise, but I was 22 and had wide eyes and just wanted to make the business work. But I was this close to giving up on that deal. And my fiance, then girlfriend at the time, had said, like, it's your first deal, just keep pushing. Which I think is so interesting because there's definitely been other times where she has pumped the brakes, and probably very similar to you, Pete, in a wise fashion. And like you had said, Seth, has the ability to see some risks that we don't always see.
That's crazy.
You mentioned earlier, Pete, that you have done a couple of deals with money partners and you're working on a third one now. So I'm just curious, what triggers the need for you to get a money partner? Like, what does that arrangement look like? Is it like a 50-50 split, or what are they bringing to the table? What are you bringing to the table? Just help us understand the dynamic of that relationship.
I think the first one, it was kind of a cash flow thing. I was buying a bunch of properties in that certain month. I was like, we had additional funds and everything, but I don't want to like ever get down to the point where we're like low on funds or anything like that. And so in that situation, I figured, well, at some point I'm going to need to get money partners involved or whatever. So I figured I'd try one. So we did the first deal with the money partner, and that one was really great for both sides. I mean, I think we bought it for 40 and sold it for 120, and the whole holding time was like 32 days or something like that. So it was a perfect one for that, for both sides. Everyone was happy and that, things like that. The next one was a larger purchase price, $315,000. So, and that was like 650 acre property. So that at the time was like a big chunk. And I was like, well, I think this is a good property to find a partner on. Because even though, projected resale price was over 600,000, it was still, it's a big chunk of money to just throw into one property. And I was like, well, maybe it'll take a little bit longer to sell or something like that. So, and on that one, I think we ultimately held it for about 5 months, and we sold it for $595. So we each did very well in the deal. And both of those transactions, they were just 50-50 split. And then we also just bought one in December, I believe, that was another larger property. This one was a $360,000 purchase price. Did that with partners as well. I threw in a little bit of money, but just a little bit, and then they threw in the rest. And then we're going to split it 50-50 when it sells.
Has this been the same partner on all three of those deals?
3 different partners.
So you've kind of gotten to see maybe how different money partners underwrite these kind of deals and decide yes or no. Has it been like a very different process for all 3 of them, or do they all kind of look at the same stuff?
I think they've been all very similar in the fact that, they're looking at kind of the same thing I am, the comps and agent opinions and things like that. And so, yeah, similar in the way they review the deal, a little bit different procedurally, how they want to handle the logistics of the transaction and the title and things like that. All pretty similar.
Is it a similar arrangement in terms of the 50-50 split? Just expectations about how that's supposed to work?
Yeah, I've done 50-50 split on all of them. Yeah, I think that's fair, especially when we're talking bigger dollar properties and things that, may take a little bit longer than the average properties. So I think that's fair. And that's one of my things in all of my dealings. I mentioned that we always do all of our deals through real estate agents, local brokers. And one of my big things is I pay 10% commission on pretty much all of these deals. And I know that I could probably negotiate down farther and that type of thing. But I really feel strongly that it has to really be a good incentive to work for both parties. I know, in a deal partner situation, there's probably opportunities to negotiate a better split and things like that. But I just try to look at things. Are they fair? And what's going to be a win-win for both sides. And, I'm definitely comfortable with the split like that. And, just kind of the way I try to run my business.